Good afternoon, everyone. This is Maria Holden. I'm so happy to be here today to talk with you about space planning. Um, for me, this is a welcome opportunity to picture collections while we're away from them, and I hope it is for you too. Let me start out by introducing myself. I'm responsible for the preservation of the collections of the Office of Cultural Education in Albany, New York. It's a state institution. OCE encompasses the collections of the New York State Museum, Library, and Archives. Prior to my moving into this preservation officer position for OCE, I worked for 30 years for the New York State Archives in various capacities, starting as a conservator. My experience with space planning, I worked on the New York State Archives and New York State Library major facility renovation, which was completed in the early 2000s. We redesigned our public work and storage spaces in our facility. We renovated a whole floor. We installed an all new air handling system, and we also installed a sprinkler system. I'm currently working on another project. This is the planning of a new stewardship facility for collections that don't fit in our current facility in the Cultural Education Center in Albany. The new stewardship facility will house collections of the State Museum, Archives, and Library. It will be a storage facility pretty much only. There will be a few collection management spaces. We're estimating that it will be about 200,000 square feet. We've completed a comprehensive feasibility study and are currently seeing if our facility will fit into a nearby existing lab facility. So this is kind of a renovation. Instead of building a new building, we're seeing if we can fit our functions and needs and collections into an existing facility. We're working with a great team of architects and engineers on that project. Environmental requirements for people and collections are not the same. Space planning should be rooted in the functions that we carried out and should optimize our work in collections preservation and access. Today, we'll put that approach into practice. We'll see how and why it's best for our collections, our staff, and our visitors and researchers to operate in spaces that support them and not to intermingle functions like putting collections in the research room, or storing collections in the research room, or placing your office in the stacks. We'll learn how to recognize good space and also how to recognize bad space and to know when not to accept space that is inappropriate. We'll examine all the considerations and factors that come into play in any space planning effort. I want to acknowledge and recommend this book to you, Archival and Special Collections Facilities, Guidelines for Archivists, Librarians, Architects, and Engineers by Tom Wilstead and Michelle Pacifico. This is a great resource. It was really helpful to me in preparing this talk. It has been helpful to me for many years in other ways, and I commend it to you for your space planning projects. And they also wanted to put a plug in for DHPSNY. Keep in mind that DHPSNY delivers on-site planning and assessment services for free to institutions in New York that are eligible, and that's most of them. And they're ready to help you with your space planning efforts. The New York State Archives has never had enough space in our main facility for all its collections. We have over 160,000 cubic feet of collections. So we store some of them in offsite rented space. The way we select collections for offsite storage is we pick the low use collections, ones that are less vulnerable, and ones that don't have intrinsic value. After an offsite storage disaster in 1995, I'll tell you more about that in a minute, the archives established minimum standards to help us evaluate offsite storage. If you must use rented or leased space to store your collections, make sure that the conditions there and that your required conditions are written into your purchase order or contract. And here are the criteria that we use to evaluate offsite storage space. The temperature in the storage area should be maintained at 59 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. I know that's a really broad range. The optimal area within that range is 55 to 65 degrees for paper collections, but that's pretty tight. I think 55 to 70 would be okay. The RH, relative humidity in the storage area, should be maintained at 35 to 60%. And for both the temperature and RH ranges, fluctuations should be minimized as much as possible. The storage facility should be equipped with an automatic fire detection system, that's like smoke detectors, and automatic fire suppression if possible. And if not automatic fire suppression, there should be a combination of portable fire extinguishers and a standpipe system. There's a lot of information about fire protection published by the NFPA, that's the National Fire Protection Association. I think that's what the acronym stands for, and you can look them up. The storage room should be locked and alarmed at all times using an electronic access control system connected to an alarm station, and there should be perimeter security. There should be locks on all doors and windows. Daylight or unfiltered fluorescent light should be minimized as much as possible in the storage area. The space should be monitored for pests. Eating and drinking shouldn't happen there, nor should smoking. Um, all boxes should be elevated 4 inches from the floor. The storage facility should not be located in a floodplain. And finally, the facility should be available for inspection by representatives of the state archives at any time. A really nice way to monitor your space from afar is to use remote data loggers that are connected, networked, or through the internet. And that's a way that you can monitor the temperature and relative humidity conditions there. And periodic in-person inspection is critical. Let me tell you a little bit about the disaster that happened in 1995. The archives at that time stored some of our overflow collections in a nearby armory in Albany. And in late July of 1995, the facility washed out, not totally, but there was serious damage and flooding because of a flash flood. About 3,000 boxes, and they were the ones that were at the bottom of our pallets, were soaked. What followed was a huge, very expensive and taxing salvage operation. We freeze dried the um, the collections, the boxes that were damaged. In 1995, it cost $50,000. I'm sure it would be much, much, much more now. It was incredibly disruptive to us, and the archives is still recovering from this disaster. We're still integrating the boxes that were sort of separated because of their water damage into the series that they came from. And Marissa just sent me a question. For some reason, my chat box isn't working. The question is, how much of a difference, hold on, are there between on-site and off-site storage requirements? There are differences, but I guess maybe not significant. Um, but our on-site conditions are more stringent than what we require in off-site. And I think there's some negotiating room with these requirements. And if you're really concerned about the collections that you must store offsite, I would suggest that you negotiate to the sort of better end of these conditions. For example, 77 degrees for me is way too hot for the storage of archivable materials. So I would reduce that. Okay, on to the next slide. Perfect space is hard to find, but there are ways that we can mitigate the risks. And one way to do that is with monitoring. For most of us, pipes are unavoidable. Usually you just can't see them, but they are everywhere. They're above ceilings, behind walls in most of our storage spaces. It's hard to find space that is isolated from the risk of pipe leaks, roof leaks, and exterior walls. Um, but regular monitoring is really important. And had we monitored these stacks that are located under a waste pipe, it's actually a sewage pipe, um, we would have been able to reduce the damage that was caused to these early 20th century Supreme Court volumes that were stored under a waste pipe. These volumes literally stewed in sewage until they were discovered. This is in our facility in Albany, and this is what happened to them. They became fused because of the sewage and the moisture from the sewage and mold, fused into a solid block, and they could not be salvaged. We lost hundreds of these volumes. Fortunately, they were not unique. There were other law libraries in New York that had the set. And I have another question. Um, is the 4-inch floor clearance for reasons of water damage only, or are there other reasons for it? I think it's for water damage only, or mostly, but I think it's probably advantageous in terms of pests, mice, to elevate your collections above the floor. And our shelving should always, our bottom shelf should be elevated at least that much, even in our regular storage, our non-offsite storage. We, as curators, archivists, librarians, conservators, registrars, technicians, whatever we do, whoever we are, know that these three functions, collection storage, collection management, and access to collections, don't really capture the nuances of everything that we do. Where would conservation and exhibition and accessioning fit in here? Actually, in collection management, I think, but but we need to distill what we do into a few functions, these three functions, because it gives us a simple framework that helps us evaluate, improve, plan, and create the physical context for our collections and their use and enjoyment. As we talk, think about your situation relative to space. Do you need to improve your space for the functions that you carry out? Do you want to create a new space? Are you planning a new facility? We're going to examine each of these scenarios with case studies, but first, let's talk about the data gathering and analysis that are required no matter what your needs. Whatever the scale of your space planning project, no matter whether you're improving your space or creating a new one, consider these things and ask the right questions. What is the nature of your collection and what is its projected growth? What's your collection made out of? Is it primarily one medium, like paper and books? Is it mixed? Does it contain unstable materials like acetate film or nitrate? And how fast is it growing? Consider its environmental needs. This will be based on the composition of your collection, what it's made out of. But for that material or for those materials, what's the recommended environment? Is your existing furniture, whether it's for storage or for processing or research, acceptable? Or is it inappropriate for the function? What's your current footprint and what's the impact of a space use change on that? How do you move your collections? How would a new layout influence that? Adjacencies. What functions need to be physically located next to each other and which ones apart? The last two considerations may require some research. Consulting with your building manager, if you have one, or maybe a local official. But what is your building structure and how does it affect placement of functions and collections, especially heavy ones? The other is health and safety. Are there any risks that need to be addressed? Or are there any that might be introduced through a new design? Let's take a look at these and how they affect your plans. And I have another question, and it is this. Due to code requirements, our architect wants us to have an emergency exit through the collection storage room. Is there any way this can work, or do I need to dig my heels in and hold on, having a hard time doing so many things at once. Do I need to deal my heels in and request that the collection storage room be moved in the floor plan? That would mean the emergency exit would be through a gallery space, which is preferable. I'm going to say I think you might need to consult with a couple of other professionals for this. I don't really know enough about this. I am a collections person. I'm not an architect or an engineer or a health and safety officer. So I suggest that you do some research and find who would be a good authority on that question. Okay. Collection makeup will influence your environment, your storage furniture, and your containers. What media are present? Do you have paper? Do you have a mixed history collection? Decorative arts? What's the predominant one? I'm guessing that the answer for many of you is mixed, that you have mixed collections. Excuse me, I have to cough. But you need to find out. How big is your collection? How much does it grow every year? Do you keep annual records of accessions and acquisitions that include their volume or quantity? If not, start now. This is really important data, and you need this data to project growth. You need to base growth on actual evidence, and that's what your accessioning information will provide. Excuse me. Are there weeding opportunities? An inventory of the collection slated for improved or new storage is a must. Remember that your survey data, your catalog, your accession log, or your finding aids will help you here. Knowing the media that you have will help you figure out what environmental conditions your collections require. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Weight. How much does an average box in your collection weigh? I know in the state archives, the average box of records is about 30 pounds. Archival records are very, very heavy. And if you sort of consider a stack and all that weight of stacked boxes, whether it's 5 shelves high or 6 high, on their footprint on the floor, that's a lot of weight. And you need to find out what that is to make sure that your storage location can bear that weight. How is your collection housed? Is it housed? Does it have the recommended levels of protection like folder and box? Or are the items loose in a cabinet drawer or unprotected on a shelf? Now is a really good time to intervene. And you should go with uniform standard sizes for boxes, drawers, shelves, and cabinets as much as possible. This is the most efficient approach and the best for collections preservation. Do you have any collections that look like this? These are some early court records that the archives recently brought in that were inadequately housed. There's no protection here. Is this what your collections look like? If it is, then they need to be rehoused before they're moved. And this is the way they should be rehoused. They should be protected in folders and ideally vertically filed in an upright document box, unless they're very fragile, in which case they should be stored flat. This is a collection of Erie Canal glass plate negatives. In the state archives, note the standard box size, which is perfect for protecting the glass plates. And note that the shelves are adjusted so that they're kind of the perfect height for these boxes. This is efficient and really good for the collection. There are other negatives in this collection that are large and broken, and these ones, they're glass. These ones are stored flat in, again, uniform sized flat storage boxes. Same size boxes, and the shelf height is adjusted especially for stacks of 3 of these boxes. This is records carton storage. Note the density, the efficiency of storing boxes like this, because we're not wasting space. The uniformity here is sort of the name of the game. It really works in terms of capacity maximization. For map storage, go with a few standard size map cases and folders. At the state archives, we have 3 case sizes, roughly 24 by 36, 36 by 48, and 46 by 75. When you have standard sizes, you increase your ability to stack them to create like a continuous surface on the top. It's efficient and neat and tidy. And also go with standard size folders. It's not a great idea to have lots of different sizes of folders in a case. If you need to place smaller items in a larger case, you can use columns of folders, as you can see in this slide, instead of odd sizes. For oversized maps and plans, ones that are too big to store in flat files or map cases, you should roll them on the outside of alkaline tubes, and that's what you see here. The tubes are at least 4.5 inches in diameter. The maps are are wrapped around the tube, image in. They're wrapped with an alkaline heavyweight paper and then finally covered with polyester to protect them. And then they're placed in very deep shelves, and again, adjusted to exactly the right height. And this is a close-up of our this map rolling technique. You can kind of see the layers here. I'm going to use my mouse. The map in here, the outer layers of paper and polyester. Environment, security, and fire protection. This is what's at the top of our continuity of operations plan. This is mission critical for cultural heritage organizations, and the COVID-19 pandemic is really reinforcing this. At a time when our institutions are closed and understaffed, all that really matters right now is that our collections, there are other things that matter, but in our world, what really matters is that our collections are secure, protected against fire, and stored in the appropriate environmental conditions. In the last few years, there has been a shift in thinking about recommended environmental conditions. For most collections, a relaxing of the tight conditions previously recommended, which were found to be both unattainable and energy consuming. The American Institute for Conservation has published guidelines. It's available on their wiki, and the temperature that is recommended, the temperature range is 59 to 77 degrees, and the RH that's recommended is 40 to 60% RH, and as I said previously, fluctuations should be kept to a minimum. For paper-based collections, the drier and cooler, the better. And at the State Archives, we strive for 55 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit for paper-based collections and 35 to 55% RH for those collections. There are exceptions here. I'm going to name a couple. For some paleontology collections that contain pyrite, the RH should be much lower. And for unstable photographs like acetate, the storage should be in a cool, cold, or ideally frozen space. I have a few questions before I move on to light. I'll just take a look at them. There's a question, what about book library storage? If that's referring to environmental control, temperature, and RH conditions, I would recommend, again, the 55 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit and 35 to 55% RH. But these are very much subject to a lot of other factors, your building, your equipment, whether you have windows. So remember that these um, recommendations may need to be modified for your context. Um, okay, a question. Are these polyester tubes available at a local hardware store, or are they a specialized product? They are a specialized product that you will need to purchase from one of the archival supply uh, vendors. They're alkaline, they're paper-based, so they're kind of cardboard, but alkaline, so they're not acidic, um, but they're made out of thick uh, paper cardboard material, and then they are eventually wrapped in polyester. I'm going to move on to light. I'll give you some light levels for collection management areas, for display, and for storage. For collection management um, work, the light level should be 30 to 60 foot candles, which is a unit of measure of light, and less than 75 microwatts per lumen of damaging UV radiation. I'm going to give you a couple more levels here, but I wanted to let you know that CCAHA, the Conservation Center in Philadelphia, has a really great document that summarizes recommended light levels. So Google that and you can use that. It's the same as what I'm saying. For exhibit, the foot candle range is 5 to 15, and that will vary depending on collection media, paper-based materials, watercolor. Those need to be exhibited at the bottom end of the foot candle scale. And again, less than 75 microwatts per lumen of UV rays. And finally, for storage, hopefully you can keep your storage areas dark most of the time, but the recommendation is 1 to 5 foot candles, and again, less than 75 microwatts per lumen. Oh, here's a great question. For the map rolling technique, why would you not put the map inside the tube? And that's because, I know it seems weird to put it on the outside, but when you roll up a map, it's kind of like a spring. You like slide it in the tube and then it expands to be exactly the size of the inside of the tube. And it becomes very tight, kind of unwound and tight. And so in order to pull the map out, it's very much at risk of being abraded against the inside wall of the tube. So that's why. Security and fire protection, regardless of function, whether you're using a space for storage or collection management or access, security and fire protection are very critical. For security, think about your access control. Who can get into your storage space or any space? Who is authorized to enter? That's something that you can control, you and your leadership and your staff. And I suggest that you establish criteria and only authorize the people who need to go into that space to do their work to go in. And also, I think it makes sense for the people who supervise those who go into the space to do their work to be able to have access to. But it doesn't make sense for all of your staff to have access to spaces where they really don't have any business being. So I know it doesn't sound very generous as an approach, but I think it's the sound approach. For your perimeter security, think about your windows, your doors, any point of entry into your space. Is it secure? Can people get in? Are the windows locked? Ideally, your windows and doors would also be alarmed. Fire detection and suppression. We've talked about this already. Detection is absolutely essential. Some form of suppression is as well. Automatic suppression, the kind that goes off when nobody's there, like sprinklers is the best. But there are other fire protection provisions that may be acceptable in your context, like extinguishers. If you're planning a major renovation or a new facility, be sure to include installation of a sprinkler system in your program if you don't have one already. This is an opportunity for you to make a big difference in the protection of your collection. Furniture is part of this analysis because it has a huge influence on the preservation of your collection. Is it protective of your collection, or can it damage your collection the way a tube could? That's actually not furniture, that's an enclosure, but that's the kind of damage that we want to avoid through what we do to house our collections. Is it made out of a material that off-gases, like oak or formica or a laminate? Those are not good materials to use with collections. Instead, steel cases with a baked-on enamel or powder paint finish are recommended. Is your furniture overcrowded? Is it too small for the collection items that you're storing there? Um, does it accommodate the enclosures, the levels of protection that you really need to have on your collection? It has an impact on staff health and safety. Is your furniture stable and sturdy? Is it ergonomic? It's a major factor, your furniture, in calculating your collection footprint. Space planning is done in the language of square feet. Many of us from the archives world think in terms of cubic feet for collections measurement. And so it's very common to have to convert your cubic feet to square feet in space planning efforts. Your storage and furniture units are relied on in the calculation of the footprint of your collection, especially in museums with odd-sized and shaped artifacts that don't really fit in a box. This is the storage mode. It's a file system that is still in use, I believe, in an old courthouse in New York State. And this is an example of obviously a less than ideal storage solution. It's possible that this is no longer in use, but just a couple years ago it was. And this is a view of the stacks at the New York State Archives at the Cultural Education Center in Albany. And I wanted to show you this. I'm sure many of you are familiar with compacting of collections, actually putting shelving ranges on mobile carriages, sort of tracks on the floor so that they can be scrunched together and made much more dense and efficient. But this is a great solution if you have space issues. And again, if you're doing a major renovation or designing a new facility, I highly recommend you consider compacting. And it's not just for boxes of archives and manuscripts. It works for museum collections as well in different formats. How do your collections enter your building? Do you have easy access to a parking lot? This is our loading dock at the Cultural Education Center in Albany, where we do have easy access to trucks. Do you have access to the street? Is there an efficient path from the point of entry to their destination? Are your doorways wide enough for your largest collection items? Do you know what your largest collection items are? It's really good to know. Do you use pallets to move collections, like in this picture? Are your doorways wide enough for pallets? Do you need to move collections vertically, like to a second or third floor or to a basement? Do you have an elevator for that, or do you have to figure out another way? In 2017, the archives moved a large collection of historic court records, 2,000 boxes actually, from Lower Manhattan to Albany. These court records came out of an old, beautiful Beaux-Arts building in Lower Manhattan. And this is a real challenge. You can see that we have our moving truck. Let's see if I can find here on the street, but there were several, actually, it looks like about 8 or 10 steps that we had to take to get there. There was no way to easily get those boxes out to the truck. We use this elevator here. It's a small elevator designed for a wheelchair to move some of the boxes up, and the movers also fashioned a ramp for the stairs, as I recall, but it was really, really difficult. And it was really nice when we got to our building in Albany to be able to put the records on pallets and move them around pretty easily, including onto our elevators, although you can see it was a really tight fit. And then bringing them up to our stacks on the 11th floor of our building, we were able to use this conveyor to efficiently move them into their final resting place. Adjacencies. Think about your workflow, the functions that occur in your space, their sequence and how they intersect with collections and the public. Which spaces should be adjacent? Couple that come to my mind are your public entrance and your research room. Another couple of functions that should be adjacent are your research room and a locker room if you have one. Which functions should be kept separate? And I would recommend that you not mingle your office area and your collection storage area, and that your public area, say research room, and your collection storage area should be separate. That's clearly a security risk. Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Um, One is, I've been asked to share the title and author of the book that I mentioned in the beginning. I will definitely do that. Another question is, hold on. I'm having to look at these on my phone. Thank you, Marissa, for sending these. Is there any string that holds the map in place? I think we're talking about the rolls. Yes, we use twill tape, which is gentler and kind of softer than string, to hold the whole package in place. So that's on the very outside of the package. And I think that's it for now. So we'll move on to your building structure. What kind of roof does your building have? Is it old? Is it leaky? Are there areas that are vulnerable where you would not want to store collections? What about ceiling heights? Can they accommodate your collections and furniture? And if you have sprinklers and smoke detectors, can they accommodate those? You need to have a minimum of 18 inches between your sprinkler head and the top of your shelving or cabinets. What about your building fabric? Building is made out of, especially kind of the outside of it. Ours, which is pictured here, is cast concrete with marble cladding. What's yours? Is it brick? Is it wood? Is there a vapor barrier in your exterior walls? This is something that would help resist the diffusion of moisture through the wall. Are there windows? Windows are great as illumination in a research room, but generally are not a good thing to have in our institutions. They can cause a heat buildup in the summer, actually in the winter too. Drafts, if they're a little bit leaky, will affect your environment. They often need to be mitigated with shades and other things. What load can your floors support? If you're thinking about moving a heavy collection or compacting your storage on those carriages that we looked at a few minutes ago, definitely need to check with your building manager or superintendent to make sure that your building can bear the weight. And if you don't have a building manager, I know many of you are from smaller institutions, consult with an engineer in your community or a public official who has some authority over building requirements. So take these factors into account as you consider a move or a new use for your space. I have another question, I think. Nope, sorry, thought I heard something, but didn't. Okay, health and safety. Um, Health and safety of your staff, your visitors is paramount. Um, let's start with storage furniture. Is it stable? Is it strong enough for the materials that it's supporting and properly anchored to the wall, floor, to each other? Are your aisles ADA compliant? And that means a minimum of 32 inches wide. Are your emergency routes and exits clear? They must not be blocked. I'm reminded of the question that we had earlier. Again, this is an area where there are people who specialize in this, and it is probably not us. So look for the resources that are the authorities here. I have a quick story from the state archives. One of our archives overflow storage areas is on a different floor of our building. And in this space, we store about 10,000 boxes of archival records. Um, they are stored in an area that was originally designed for library books. It's a space that we gained access to, fortunately. And the shelving worked out okay, but we had a couple of incidents where heavy boxes on the top shelves, which were, I believe, 9 inches deep, toppled over. Fortunately, nobody was around when this happened. We would discover sort of mounds of boxes. And we realized that it was really unsafe to put heavy boxes on these too narrow or too shallow shelves. So recently completed a project. It doesn't look that challenging, but it took a ton of resources to remove all the boxes on the top shelves, replace the shelves with deeper ones, 11-inch shelves, and then put the boxes back on. And here you can see um, how the shelving looks after this project, much safer. Okay, we have another question. How should books be stored on shelves? Is it better to put them in boxes or just on the shelves? Vertical. Great question. Not easy to answer. Um, it depends on a lot of things, including their fragility, their size, their value, the storage environment. Do you have a lot of particulate material, in which case you would want to use boxes? If it's a circulating collection, I don't think I would recommend boxes, but maybe some librarians out there would disagree with me. So there are lots of variables. I would say for rare, fragile, intrinsically valuable materials, boxes are to be recommended. But for circulating and sort of non-rare materials, I believe boxes would be more of a hindrance than a help. Um, so I hope that is helpful. I don't know offhand the point at which you would store an oversized volume flat instead of vertically. I think it has to do with shelving sizes, and I'm sure there are people out there who know the answer to this. So I'm sorry I can't answer that more specifically. So now we are going to talk about sort of the scenarios that we touched on in the beginning. What do you need to do? And we're going to uh, hear about some real life case studies that um, improved storage, collection management, and collection access. So you can see how different institutions have applied these concepts in their own setting. For storage, we will visit the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and learn about a project to protect and move selected oversized maps. to move them into better space. For collections management, we will visit the conservation lab at the Office of Cultural Education in Albany. And same for access, we'll look at the research room for the archives and state library in Albany. So we're starting out at the University of Illinois. I want to acknowledge my colleague, Cher Schneider. She recently joined our staff in Albany as the head of conservation for OCE, but previously she had been in conservation at the University of Illinois. And she gave me these slides and commentary for this sort of storage improvement scenario. These collections were inaccessible because of poor condition. They had only partial intellectual control and were in less than ideal housing. And these are oversized map collections at the University of Illinois. Note the map slumped on the wall over here. And so the focus of this project, which was undertaken by the conservation staff at U of I, was to move low-use, oversized materials out of this space. Note the intermingling of storage and use here, and into the high-density cold storage unit, which had much better conditions and appropriate storage furniture. Even though the available storage space was much better, you know, some resistance to moving was experienced, and that's because moving is very resource intensive. Before you move collections, you need to gain intellectual control of them, and giving up proximity to a collection that you've had, you know, right next to you can be very difficult for collections managers. So this is something to be aware of and ready for. Conservation staff and the collections manager surveyed all of the special collections and met with curators to see if they wanted to move their large collections. 3 of the 7 collections took advantage of this opportunity, and they were maps, Illinois history, and the Lincoln Collection and University Archives. Oversized materials in various formats and housings, including boxed, were evaluated and considered for moving. Remember that an inventory is essential in any collection move or space planning effort. There were maps that were flat on top of map cases, rolled maps unsupported. This was a very large project carried out in phases over a few years. Phase 1 included identifying all the maps and figuring out their use and value. Resources for conservation were scarce, but staff were able to use this opportunity to stabilize the collection through rehousing until a time when conservation needs could be assessed. The second phase included condition evaluation and placing all the oversized maps into archival tubes and labeling each tube. The placement of the maps, it was a way to sort of organize them and help sort them. So just temporary while plans were finalized for their final housing and movement. All loose and improperly stored items were rehoused in archival enclosures. These were typically custom made, but not always. Depending on value, some items did receive conservation treatment. The third phase of the project was identifying the items to be moved into the high density cold storage space, and then securing the materials that were needed to house the oversized materials. Staff secured funding and purchased all the materials needed to rehouse the collections. To save money, they bought large tubes. These are the alkaline tubes that they could then cut down to the proper size using a circular saw and a jig. And here's a really good illustration of what they look like after they're rolled around the outside of the alkaline tube. And you can see the polyester layer right here at the very last layer, and here's the twill tape that I talked about. Finally, the items were labeled and barcoded to facilitate retrieval and placed in cold storage. And here's a great example of boxes and shelving being configured so that it's very efficient use of space. They're in a much better place now. And when researchers and staff want to consult the materials, they view them in the research room that serves the cold storage facility. So they're not right next door to where the staff work, but they're still managed by the department that owns them. Welcome to the Paper Conservation Lab at our Cultural Education Center in Albany. I want to use this as an example of, I think, a well laid out conservation lab. It's not fancy at all, but it works. This was redesigned as part of our renovation in the early 2000s. It's a large space. It's about 2,000 square feet. Layout is very much based on function. We have a treatment space in the center of the room. See if I can use my mouse here to show you this area. The wet treatment area and large sink are here. Whoop. Right here. Drying rack is right behind it. We have large surfaces in the middle of the room, and along the right edge here, workstations, personal workstations for staff. At the far end of the lab, way down here, is where we store supplies. There's some flat files for papers and boards, boxes. We also have some storage here for encapsulation. You can see that those large rolls are near the encapsulator. And then at the place that we are standing, where the camera is where we have cubicles for staff. We have 2 staff who are permanently located in the lab. And it's also where collection storage is. So we have flat files for collection items and other very secure pieces of furniture for them. We like the idea of having the collection, storage, and office areas being near each other for oversight purposes. And here's a slide that shows where we work on collections and how we work on them. On the left, our wet treatment area, and again, that's near the center of the room. And on the right, a workstation where a volume, I think it's a prison admission register, is being disbound. And this is our research room that serves the state archives as well as manuscripts and special collections of the state library. This too was redesigned in the early 2000s. Note the spaciousness, the space between tables, comfortable chairs, natural light, which wasn't easy because we have no windows. So those are skylights on the floor. We have power at each work table, good sight lines. The reference archivist and reference librarian at the front of the room can see all the way through. We also do have security cameras located in a couple of points, including right there. Very comfortable. I'm going to close with some observations about planning a major renovation or a new facility. The most important thing to impart is that you should get professional guidance if you're embarking on a major renovation or new facility planning. I know that DHPSNY institution sizes and budgets are wide-ranging, but if you can swing it, you should work with professional architects and engineers. For both of the big projects that I've been involved in, we also brought on board a preservation environment consultant, and I highly recommend this if you can swing it. Be ready to assume the role of client and to represent your collections and staff and users. You are the expert on your collection and its needs, your operations and your audience, but most of you are not engineers or architects. Here is the programming process. Let's walk through it. You start out with your response to why you need a new facility. Do you need more space, better environment, new air handling system? You'll need detailed data about your collection, collection volume, footprint, media, projected growth. How big is it going to be in 5 years, 10 years, 25 years? Its environmental requirements. Get your staff involved. You really need their expertise and input, not only with a big project like this, but really in any space planning project. What functions will you carry out in the new facility, in the new space? Conservation, storage? Are you going to add a public research room? Then the all-important feasibility study, which assembles the collection data and footprint, collection management needs, environmental requirements, specifications for furniture and finishes, and crunches the numbers and tells you how much it's going to cost to do what you need, to build the facility or to renovate the facility to meet your needs. The feasibility study often serves as the basis for the next step down in the bottom row here now, which is design, and also the selection of the designer and even the construction provider. I'll close with an image from the State Archives digital collections that really resonates today. This is a parade of Red Cross nurses on Fifth Avenue passing the New York public in 1917. Shout out to the real heroes in our midst and a nice reminder of the importance of our documenting and preserving their contributions for tomorrow. Here is my contact information. Please feel free to call, email. Probably email is better right now, but I'm very available. So feel free to email me if you have any follow-up questions or questions about a space planning project. And I know DHPSNY staff are also available to help you with that. I'm going to take a look at my phone. I don't believe there are any additional questions since the one about storage of books, but I know people wanted to get another look at the book about space planning, and I don't know if I can get to the, I don't want to have to scroll through all my slides, there are so very many, but I'll give you the authors, and they are Thomas Wilsted, W-I-L-S-T-E-D, and Michelle with one L, Pacifica. And the title of the book is Archival and Special Collections Facilities, Guidelines for Archivists, Librarians, Architects, and Engineers. I know it's available on Amazon, so look for it. I believe it's also available through SAA. If there are any other questions, please enter them in the chat room. I'm checking my phone. I don't think I see any, but maybe Marissa, is there anything else?
Thank you everyone for coming. We had a great turnout here, and thank you, Maria, for doing such a wonderful job.
My pleasure. It was really fun.
we have our next collections care webinar coming up on Monday, assessing the conditions of your book collections. I know we had some questions about books, so please join us at 11 a.m. on Monday, 4/20. More information at dpsny.org/webinars, and we will be sending the recording of this webinar, list of additional resources from Maria, and a PDF of the slideshow within 1 week. Thanks again, everybody.